For the longest time, I believed I was the luckiest man alive. My wife, Clara, was the kind of woman who could light up an entire room just by walking into it. Her laughter had a melody that could soften even the hardest of days, and her smile, that gentle, radiant curve, had a way of pulling me back from the edge of exhaustion every evening. We met in our early 20s, back when love felt endless and simple. She was ambitious, full of dreams, always chasing the next horizon. I, on the other hand, found joy in the quiet things, stability, peace, a home that felt warm. Somehow we fit. Her fire and my calmness balanced each other perfectly. For 6 years, we built a life together, a modest house on the edge of the city, weekend coffee dates, shared playlists, and whispered plans about the future. To the world, we were the perfect couple. Even to myself, it felt that way, until slowly, the small details began to shift. It started subtly. Clara began coming home later, claiming work was getting busier. She would smile less, talk less, and spend long minutes scrolling through her phone, lost in another world. The warmth in her voice started to fade, replaced by distraction and distance. I noticed, of course I did, but I told myself it was just a phase, that she was stressed, tired, overworked. Love, I learned, can make you blind to the truth staring right at you. There were nights when I'd watch her sleep beside me, wondering where the woman I fell in love with had gone. I could still see traces of her, the way she curled up under the blanket, the faint scent of her perfume. But something was missing. Something that used to be ours no longer belonged to me. And though I didn't know it then, that was the beginning of the end. The quiet unraveling of love I once believed would last forever. The first cracks in our marriage appeared so quietly that I almost didn't hear them. It wasn't sudden explosion or a dramatic fight. It was silence. The kind of silence that creeps into a home and makes every sound echo louder than it should. Clara started changing in small, almost invisible ways. She began dressing up more than usual for work. New perfumes, new hairstyles, subtle touches of makeup that she never wore for me anymore. When I told her she looked beautiful, she'd give me a distracted smile and hurry out the door, as if my words no longer mattered. At first, I thought she was simply trying to impress her boss or colleagues. She had always been ambitious, always striving to prove herself. But soon, the changes grew harder to ignore. She started coming home later, sometimes hours after she said she'd leave the office. Her explanations were always the same: a late meeting, too much paperwork. The team went out for dinner. Her phone became her closest companion. It was always in her hand, her eyes glued to the screen, her laughter hidden behind the soft glow of messages I wasn't meant to see. When I walked into the room, she'd tilt the screen away or lock it instantly. I told myself not to doubt her, that love meant trust. But deep down, unease had begun to bloom like a slow poison. One evening, my best friend Liam came over for dinner. He'd known us since college, had seen our relationship from its earliest spark. Midway through the evening, I caught him glancing at Clara with a faint frown. Later, when she wouldn't take a call, he leaned closer and whispered, "Ethan, she's different. You see it too, don't you?" I did, but saying it out loud made it too real. That night, long after she'd fallen asleep, I stared at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of her breathing. Her phone buzzed once on the nightstand. I turned my head and caught a glimpse of the message that flashed on the screen. "Can't wait to see you again tonight." The words sliced through me like glass, small, simple, and devastating. The message haunted me for days. Those 7 words, "Can't wait to see you again tonight," replayed in my mind like a cruel melody. I tried convincing myself it was innocent, a misunderstanding, a friend from work perhaps. But deep down, my heart already knew the truth. I became a stranger in my own home, walking on the edges of suspicion. Clara carried herself differently now, lighter, almost glowing, as if she was living a secret life that filled her with excitement. She'd hum to herself while getting ready, wearing that same perfume she once saved for our anniversaries. I watched her more closely, not out of anger, but out of quiet heartbreak. Every smile she gave her phone felt like a knife turning inside me. One Thursday evening, she mentioned another late meeting. Her tone was casual, rehearsed. Something in me broke that night. The last thread of denial snapped. I waited 15 minutes after she left, grabbed my jacket, and followed. My hands trembled as I drove, my thoughts a storm of fear, anger, and disbelief. She wasn't heading toward her office. I followed her car through dimly lit streets until she turned into the parking lot of a hotel on the outskirts of town. My pulse roared in my ears as I parked a distance away and watched her step out, dressed beautifully, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months. Then I saw him, a tall man, confident, with the kind of polished arrogance that comes from knowing you're wanted. He greeted her with a kiss, not the shy, secret kind, but one that spoke of familiarity and passion. I froze. The world around me blurred. All I could see was a woman I loved in another man's arms. It felt like time stopped. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. I wanted to run to her, to scream, to demand an explanation, but instead, I just stood there, watching the life I built crumble in silence. I took a photo, not out of spite, but to anchor the pain in something real. Proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Proof that the woman I adored had already left me long before her body did. When she came home later that night, her hair slightly undone, she smiled at me like nothing had happened. She kissed my cheek and asked if I'd eaten. I said yes, and as she walked away, humming softly, I realized that love can die quietly, not with shouting or tears, but with a single eye wrapped in a gentle smile. That night, I didn't confront her. I simply lay beside her in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence between us, the silence that now had a name. Days passed after that night, each one heavier than the last. I carried the truth like a stone in my chest, pretending not to know, pretending not to see. I watched her move through the house like a ghost of the woman I once loved, her laughter hollow, her eyes elsewhere. Every moment we shared felt like a scene in a play we both knew was ending. I didn't confront her immediately. A part of me still hoped she'd come clean on her own, that guilt would drive her to tell me the truth. But she didn't. She went on smiling, lying, and calling me love as if the words still meant something. One Sunday morning, as sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor, I finally asked, "Clara, are you happy?" She froze mid-sip of her coffee, eyes darting toward me. "What do you mean?" she asked lightly, her voice too careful. "I mean with us," I said. "With this. With me." She looked down, tracing circles on her cup. "I don't know," she whispered. "I feel trapped sometimes, like we've lost something." My heart clenched, but I nodded. "Have you found it with someone else?" Her head snapped up, eyes wide, face pale. "What? No, of course not." The lie trembled in her voice. I reached into my pocket and placed my phone on the table. The photo of her and Daniel glowing on the screen. The silence that followed was deafening. Clara's hand flew to her mouth as tears filled her eyes. "Ethan, please, it's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think," I said softly. "You don't need to explain." She reached for me, desperate. "I didn't mean for it to happen. He understands me. You've changed. We both changed." I stood up, my voice calm, too calm. "Maybe we have. But I never stopped loving you." Tears streamed down her face. "Please don't leave me. I can fix this. I promise." I looked at her, really looked, and saw not the woman I had married, but a stranger wearing her face. "You already left, Clara," I said quietly. "You just forgot to tell me." I picked up my bag, the one I'd packed the night before, and walked to the door. She followed, sobbing, begging, her voice cracking like glass. Before stepping outside, I turned once more. "One day," I said, "you'll realize what you threw away, and by then it'll be too late." Then I closed the door behind me, and with it, the life I once knew. Leaving Clara felt like tearing apart my soul away. For years, she had been my world, my laughter, my comfort, my reason to keep going. And yet, as I closed that door, I realized the world didn't end. It simply fell silent. The first few weeks were the hardest. I woke up to the emptiness of a new apartment, haunted by echoes of her laughter that only existed in memory. Her scent lingered on my clothes, Her voice replayed in my dreams. I tried to fill the silence with work, with music, with noise, but none of it drowned the ache inside me. Grief doesn't announce itself. It just settles quietly, like dust on untouched furniture. Still, day by day, I began to rebuild. I started running in the mornings, letting the cold air burn through the sadness. I learned to cook again, not for two, but for one. I reconnected with friends I had neglected, sat through long conversations where I spoke more truth than I ever had before. Therapy helped. My therapist once told me, closure doesn't come from confrontation, Ethan. It comes from acceptance. Those words stayed with me. Slowly, the weight began to lift. I found moments of peace. The soft glow of sunrise to my window, the taste of strong coffee, the calm of knowing I no longer had to question someone's loyalty. Meanwhile, Clara's perfect world began to crumble. Through mutual friends, I heard whispers that her relationship with Daniel was already falling apart. He was jealous, possessive, and cruel in ways I never was. The excitement she had chased turned to regret. She tried reaching out. A few texts, a missed call. I read her messages but never replied. Forgiveness was already forming in my heart, but not for her return, for my own freedom. Months passed. One evening, while jogging to the park, I caught my reflection in a shop window. For the first time in a long while, I didn't see a broken man. I saw someone healing, someone learning to love himself again. And in that quiet realization, I knew betrayal hadn't destroyed me. It had simply forced me to find myself beyond her. Time has a way of revealing the truth, gently for some, brutally for others. For Clara, it was the latter. After I left, she moved in with Daniel, the man who had once filled her with excitement and made her believe she was escaping monotony. At first, everything seemed perfect. Expensive dinners, surprise gifts, weekend trips. He gave her the kind of attention she thought she had been missing. But what begins in lies rarely ends in peace. Within months, the shine began to fade. Daniel's charm gave way to temper. He questioned her constantly, where she was, who she spoke to, why she dressed a certain way. The man who once flattered her now controlled her every move. He didn't love her. He owned her. Their arguments became public. Neighbors whispered. Co-workers noticed attention. Clara's once bright smile was replaced by dark circles beneath her eyes and a trembling uncertainty in her voice. At work, things got worse. Rumors spread that her promotion had been tied to her affair with Daniel. Whispers that turned into gossip, gossip that turned into humiliation. Her colleagues stopped respecting her. Her friends stopped calling. Eventually, Daniel was transferred and Clara, left exposed, was quietly let go. I didn't know all of this right away. Pieces of her downfall reached me slowly, through Liam, through mutual friends, through the small-town talk that never stays buried. Each time I heard something new, I felt an ache of pity rather than triumph. I had no desire to see her suffer. But life, it seemed, had its own lessons to teach. Months later, she texted me again. "Ethan, please, can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. In the past, those words would have sent me running to her. Now, they only reminded me of how far I'd come. I deleted the message without replying. From what I later heard, she tried to rebuild her life. She moved back into her mother's house, took up a small job at a bookstore, and started attending therapy. But the spark that once defined her was gone. She had tasted the excitement she craved, and it had consumed her. One rainy evening, fate crossed our paths again. I was sitting in a cafe, reading, when I noticed her outside, standing beneath an umbrella. Our eyes met through glass. She looked thinner, older somehow, her face a reflection of the choices she could never undo. For a moment, she smiled a weak, broken smile that spoke 1,000 apologies. I nodded politely and looked away. That was the day I realized forgiveness doesn't always need words. Sometimes, it's found in the quiet acceptance that the past is gone and that both of you are no longer the same people who once said, forever. Months passed, and with time, the storm inside me finally began to settle. The pain that once consumed me had turned into something quieter, not gone, but softened, like an old scar that no longer stings. One afternoon, I received a message from an unfamiliar number. It was from Clara's sister. She told me Clara was in therapy, struggling to rebuild her life, trying to forgive herself for what she'd done. For a moment, I just stared at the message, unsure what I felt. Pity? Sadness? Nostalgia? Perhaps all of them at once. I sat there for a long time, the phone resting in my palm, and memories began to flood back the laughter we once shared, the promises whispered in the dark, the small life we had built together. I realized then that I no longer hated her. I didn't even resent her. I simply felt distant. That night, I decided to write her one final message, not to reopen wounds, but to close them once and for all. Clara, I loved you with everything I had. Losing you broke me, but also taught me who I am without you. I've learned to forgive you not because you asked for it, but because I need peace. I truly hope you find healing, even if it's not with me. Take care of yourself. Ethan. After pressing send, I deleted her contact, not out of bitterness, but out of release. For the first time in a long while, I felt light. The past no longer held me prisoner. I stepped outside that night, the air cool and clean, and looked up at the stars, the same ones we used to wish upon. I didn't wish this time. I didn't need to. I already had everything I'd been searching for: peace, strength, and the quiet dignity of letting go. It was almost a year later, when our paths crossed one last time. I was walking through the city square on a bright spring morning, hand in hand with Lena, a kind woman I had met a few months earlier. She was gentle in all the ways life had once been harsh, patient, warm, and unafraid of the quiet. As we waited to cross the street, I caught a glimpse of Clara on the opposite side. She stood alone, holding a coffee cup, her gaze lost in thought. For a moment, our eyes met. There was no anger, no sadness, just a brief recognition between two people who had once shared everything. She smiled faintly, almost shyly, as if to say thank you or perhaps I'm sorry. I returned the gesture with a nod, nothing more. The light changed, and we walked past each other, carried away by different directions, different lives. I didn't look back. As we walked on, Lena squeezed my hand and smiled up at me. In that small, simple moment, I felt something I hadn't in years: peace, real and complete. Some love stories don't end in reunion or revenge. They end in growth, in forgiveness, in the quiet acceptance that not every love is meant to last. She broke me once, I thought, but in letting her go, I found myself again, and as she fell apart, I finally stood tall.